All right, good morning, class. Welcome to week two. So now that the kind of confusion of week one has died down a little bit, hopefully you're kind of getting acclimated to the class and you're starting to understand what it means to be in an online setting and doing that kind of work. I had a few emails that I tried to respond to as quickly as possible, but overall it seems like you guys are getting in the groove a little bit. But if there are still lingering problems in terms of kind of user interface stuff or whatever, please feel free to email me. That is kind of my job. That's what I'm here for. The other thing that I want to talk about is I want to apologize for the reading kind of mix up from last week. Some of you pointed out that there was some kind of wonkiness with the reading. So like I said, I updated the reading late last week. Obviously, I didn't expect you to scramble to cover the new reading, but I would like you to take a look at that Wardle article that I linked under week one at some point this week because it will be helpful as you try to understand this next project. All right, so that said, I want to kind of build off some of the things that you've read last week, specifically related to discourse community, because an understanding of what that concept is kind of fundamental to what we will be doing in this class and to why we do what we do in 3010. So you should have had a chance to read the Wikipedia entry on discourse community, and what you'll see is a breakdown of what John Swales defines or gives us as like 6 main characteristics of how to define a particular community in a particular way. Now, what a discourse community means is it's a community that's organized and oriented around achieving a set of common goals, essentially. Now, what that means is that um, it's a group. It's not like a family group. It's not something that you're born into. It's something that you actively join and have to participate in. And so that's why it's perfect for this class, because the whole point of 3010 is for you to start to investigate a particular career path that you're interested in, a professional environment that you want to join, things like that. And the goal of 3010 is to really prepare you or to give you the kind of knowledge that you would need to kind of get a leg up when it comes time to graduate, it comes time to kind of put out those job applications to join those communities and things like that. And so what we'll be doing is spending our time this semester doing some research on the professional community of your choice so that you can learn how they work, how they function, the kind of things they do, the kind of writing that they produce, so that you can be more prepared than you would have been when the time comes. And so we use discourse community for this work because it is very helpful in breaking down a community that you might not be familiar with. I'm kind of talking a lot, but I want to break this down really quickly. So for example, let's say you wanted to go into the medical field and you weren't really sure how the medical field did their work. I mean, you know what the medical field does, but how do they do the day-to-day stuff? Well, in this class, what you would do is you would do some research on how they do those things. How do they communicate to each other? How do they publish new knowledge? How do they share ideas? Where do they share ideas? Things like that. So this information will be instrumental to you as you progress through your studies, as you graduate, because you'll know where to go to find new information within your field, but you'll also know how to reflect the values and goals and kind of tropes of that field in your own writing so that you can have an easier entry into that community. Okay, so what I want to do then is I want to think about those concepts throughout the rest of this project because it's really going to be instrumental. You're going to be identifying a community that you're interested in, telling me and kind of thinking about how it fits those definitions, how it fits those 6 characteristics. You'll be using that as the basis for the work that you do. Okay, so that's week one in a nutshell. I know it's a lot, but we'll be talking about these things basically for the rest of the semester, and so it's okay if you don't quite understand it yet. The work that we do throughout Project One will help you get a better understanding of what that means. Okay, so let's take a look at week two then, because again, we're continuing these kind of tasks, and hopefully by doing this reading and this blog and things like that, it'll help you kind of better grasp what we're coming at. So you'll notice that for each week, I just want to reiterate this. Each week has its own module with the Monday date on there, so you know exactly what day we're doing. So your goals for this week are to do some reading out of the Wadsworth Guide, and mine looks like this. Yours should look very similar, but that's what we're talking about. If you don't have that, make sure you pick it up because it will be very helpful to you. Also, it's required. So your week for this, or your reading for this week, is chapter 1 and chapter 4. Reading, research, and the rhetorical situation, finding resources through secondary study. Chapter 1 will be very helpful to you for thinking about discourse community in general, because a lot of the things that we do in this first couple of weeks is think about rhetorical situation. Now, if you don't know what rhetorical situation means, what we're talking about is all of the things that influence a particular moment of communication. So, for example, this webcam post. When we're thinking about the rhetorical situation of this moment of communication, we're thinking about all of the things that are impacting my ability to communicate with you, right? Like the fact that it's one-sided because it is a recording. It's dark in my office because if I open up the windows, the camera gets washed out, et cetera, et cetera. All of the things that go into impacting a particular moment of communication and how meaning is conveyed, that's called the rhetorical situation. So chapter 1 will help you think about that because you'll be doing a lot of that, thinking about that in terms of your own discourse community. Chapter 4, finding resources through secondary research. Again, you're going to be doing a lot of research, so it's just a good refresher course if you haven't done a lot so far. So take a look at that. And so number 3, follow your research plan. What I'm talking about is I want you to think about the blog post that you did. Well, it was due yesterday because today's Monday. But were you just thinking about, okay, these are the first steps that I might take to start to learn more about my community. So if you know that your community uses a particular database that the library has access to, that could be like step 1 in your research plan. So for example, if I was going to investigate my community of literature scholars, I know that I can go right to the MLA database because they have a lot of stuff that I could look at, and that would be a great start. So think about what your first step might be. Is it talk to a librarian? Is it talk to a professor? Whatever that first step might be. So start to do that. Start to do some research about your community so you can start to ask some of the questions and complete some of the tasks from Project 1. So read chapter 1, read chapter 4, start to at least outline or draft Project 1, and then you'll be submitting blog 2 by Sunday. Now, again, blogs are always due by Sunday by 11:59 p.m. And I think they actually disappear. They're not available to you, like 5 minutes after that. So just be aware. Okay, so let's take a look at blog 2 just to get a feel for it. All right, so blog 2 is intended to help you get started with the drafting of Project 1. Feel free to reuse or revise any material you produce in your blog post and the completion of your major projects. Yeah, I want to stress that this is not meant to be busy work. Anything that you do in any of your blogs is good stuff to use and to adapt for your larger projects. All right, so here's the prompt. So what are 3 major communicative practices used by your discourse community? What are some commonly used genres? Choosing one of these genres, provide a brief overview of how it's used, what kind of information it conveys, and what objects it helps fulfill. Now, 500 words, again, is just like it's a goal. Shoot for 500 words. Feel free to go over. Try not to do less. All right, so let's break this down again. What are 3 major communicative practices used by your discourse community? So what are 3 ways that your community exchanges knowledge? So for mine, it would be, conferences would be one. We do a lot of kind of interdepartmental emails. That would be number 2, and maybe an article publication would be number 3. So those are 3 ways that this community that I belong to exchanges knowledge. So what are 3 ways that your community exchanges knowledge? Again, going back to the medical field, medical conferences, articles being published, any kind of keynote speeches, stuff like that. So what are 3 ways that your community exchanges knowledge? And so then with that, what are some commonly used genres? Now, when I'm talking about genre, I mean, what are some tools? Sorry if you can hear my son out there. What are some tools that your community uses to facilitate that communication? So when we're thinking about genre, we're thinking about a tool that you can use to communicate. So what are 3 tools that your community uses to communicate? And so, for example, a genre in my field would be, like a works cited page, for example, because we have this academic article, and then we use a works cited page, which is a genre, to communicate all of the research that we've done. And so what is a genre that your community uses? Are there specific communities? So for example, going back to the medical thing, the patient history form in the medical field is a great example of a genre because it communicates a lot of information really quickly. So what is a genre that your group uses that you know about? And then choosing one of those genres, just kind of give us a rundown of what it is, how it's used, why they use it, things like that. And so that's what we're looking for. Now, I don't want you to kind of overthink this. If you can't think of like the perfect genre, just think of any genre. Just think of, for example, like a company memo, for example, within a law firm would be a genre. What is that memo communicating, or like a deposition, or whatever. So there are genres within every community, and so what are some that you can think of? All right, so that is your work for this week. Again, it's mostly just kind of pre-writing and drafting for project one. Obviously, feel free to let me know if you have any questions at all. I'm happy to answer them. I will have your blogs back and graded to you within the next day or two. So thank you to all of those of you that turned it in, and I will talk to you guys later.